So, it turns out my big Marshall knife exploration journey series has proven to be pretty popular. So thank you everyone who's been watching and adding to our conversation in the comments. There's definitely going to be more to come. And speaking of more, I was impressed enough by the two Condor knives that I reviewed recently to take a chance on a third. And I picked this one for a couple of specific reasons. From the title, you know we're talking about the operator Bowie, which is a bit shorter than some of the really sizable knives we've been taking a look at, but I'm starting to find that knives of this length have a certain utility. They are arguably easier to carry and potentially handier for certain sort of tasks. And as long as they're not losing too much of what I count on a knife like this to do martially, well, even in that, it might be able to make up for it with speed and other design features, and we'll definitely talk about that in handling and application. But the other reason why I picked this knife is down this end. I've been looking at a lot of traditional and modern Bowies with this straight guard and straight grip, and I really wasn't sure, well, how this would fit me and work for me. Definitely going to take a look at that. But there's also one significant thing I'm going to have to modify before we go too far into the video, and that is, yes, traction coating. We hates it, precious. Out of the box sharpness. Like the other two Condors, has a very rough, high grit looking secondary bevel. It's pretty wide, kind of apple-seeded 1075 high carbon steel that my test files are putting between 50 and 55 HRC, so a bit on the soft side, something I'm used to in swords. Suitable more for a chopper than a fine slicey knife that you want to hold its edge for a long time, but okay, let's take a look at some paper. Definitely toothy. It's catching in a few places I found. Yeah, we'll be sliding for a bit and then it'll snag on something. But I also know I can improve this edge from the other two. Let's talk about cardboard. I do expect kind of a big fail here because of the traction coating and the width of the blade combined. Oh, yeah, that should not be that much of a fight. Did I mention how much I hate traction coating? After the traction coating and that, non-razor sharp edge, need to talk about what I see as the biggest fail of the knife, and that is the sheath. Shipped in the box, the knife and the sheath are separate. So me putting it was probably the first time it had been in. Now it's retained in there by a little hook on just one side of the feed lips, and the guard is really sharp cornered. But I figured I'd go ahead and give it a try, inserted the knife, locked it in, and I could not get it back out with any level of force that I could reasonably exert on it. So what I had to do was slip another blade into the seam here, and I'm used to being able to get away with this on a lot of Kydex sheaths, right? You just pry it a little bit and it adjusts the tension. Well, I did that, it released the knife, but this Kydex is so thin and so brittle, it permanently deformed, and now there's no retention whatsoever. And speaking of which, the second fail you're about to hear. Okay. Not only could you hear the grating sound, but yeah, the fit of the knife into the sheath, it's snug and dragging, and it's snagging in all sorts of places, and some of it's the shape of the sheath and some of it's the shape of the blade. But I think I can improve at least some of that by taking that traction coating off. Did I mention how much I hate traction coating? But yes, the sheath itself, really unusually thin Kydex, and if you look down in there, I immediately noticed a lot of just glue all over the place. So why is there glue in there? I don't know. But it has theoretically a lot of potential. There's a lot of different anchor points, and it comes with this nylon belt strap attached to it. It's pretty stout, actually. Now, I'm not a big fan of these secondary securing straps, but now that there's no retention left in the feed lips, at least not until I, well, maybe put some heat to it to reshape it and tune it, I'm probably going to have to live with that. But it is definitely designed for lots and lots and lots of different hanging attachment carry options. And yeah, it also comes with a little bit of a lanyard down here to tie it to your leg. So potential, but I don't know. After I do some modifications, we'll see. Okay, before I make any changes, let's talk about the out-of-the-box fit, finish, build quality specifications. Then I'll run my usual impact tests, remove the traction coating, among other things. I don't know what else I'm going to do to it yet. Kind of depends on how the tests go. And then we'll talk about Marshall handling. But 1075 high carbon steel blade, as I mentioned, with somewhere between a 50 to 55 Rockwell hardness. It is overall a full flat ground profile with then a pretty wide secondary apple-seeded edge bevel. Now it looks like that back edge clip point should be sharp. It is not. Am I going to sharpen it? Probably. It does also have a weird kind of a sudden sharp shelf stop here versus tapering off like a lot of other designs do. I'm not sure how I feel about it yet. It's definitely snagging on resheathing. So I may change that. But, all right, let's talk about specs. First number I'm going to throw at you, $120 US is what I got this for at Amazon. It's the same price at Chicago Knife Works, so I'll put links down in the description as usual. Blade length, and I'll definitely make some comparisons to some other knives going forward. 7.5-inch blade, 19 centimeters, and it's really hard for me to get width on this because it keeps changing. But its widest point right here, that's 1 7/8 inches, so about 4.5 centimeters. At the spine and through the tang, 5 millimeters thick. Grip length, and since I can actually use the full grip, don't know how well yet, we'll talk about that, is 5 inches or 12.5 centimeters long, giving it an overall length of 12.5 inches or about 32 centimeters. Weight, 12.5 ounces, about 354 grams, so that's just pretty light, with a point of balance that is just barely, not even a centimeter ahead of the guard. Fit, finish, well, other than the traction coating, getting down on this end, as I mentioned, the guard, yeah, the edges are pretty sharp and square. I might round those a bit just for comfort, and that might play into the sheathing, resheathing, retention equation. But I was really worried about this grip. Definitely going to talk about it in handling, but it's got some very interesting shape and taper to it. Full tang, visible all the way through. Lines are very clean. I've had some issues with the Condors where that tang, it's like the grip shrunk just a little bit and I can feel some edges. I don't feel any edges here. But instead of wood, we are talking about micarta scales, secured with 3 hollow rivets, so you could put a lanyard through there just in case this grip shape does turn out to be slippy. I'm not sure if it will. It's a pretty grippy micarta, and as I mentioned, some taper. It's not a really square grip. It tapers down quite a bit here at the top and hugs my hand well. We'll talk about this. And yeah, there's a little bit of a palm swell then and a little bit of flare out at the pommel. And at the pommel, okay, this is a bit of a concern. There is a steel butt cap, which for whatever reason has traction coating on it. Yeah, why would you put a fragile coating like this on something you're probably going to be using as a hammer? Or can you use it as a hammer? I'm not sure because I can't tell how it's attached. So there's a question for you. But, all right, out of the box, I'm surprised by how good this feels in hand. Let me go ahead and run my impact and durability tests, and we'll see how it goes. How far are we into this video? I need to know if I can use obscenities yet without getting demonetized, because here we are post-test, and I've never had a knife fail this badly yet, especially one that's ostensibly designed to take what I did to it. And my tests are relatively brief. We're not talking about extended use here. But the damage started early. I didn't even get a pristine out-of-the-box picture of this knife because I had a really quick, simple job to do. I figured I'd just grab this knife and try it out. And that was an old, weathered, pretty much rotten 1x2. I needed to get a nail out of it. Couldn't get the nail out of it. Already had a crack in it. I figured what I'd do is I'd just slip the blade into the crack and just pry that little thin board apart. And just doing that damaged the finish. Did I mention how much I hate traction coating? But then when I got to the formal testing, all right, it got much, much worse very quickly. Test number 1, stabbing, thrusting into my pel. Stab him, multiple layers of thick cardboard over a couple of inches of compressed brown paper bag paper over wood. Testing for, well, how well does the knife penetrate? And what's the kickback like into my hand? Well, penetration, we're definitely in the sharpened shovel category of geometry extremes here. In most cases, it was shoving the material deeper into the target more than it was stabbing through it. And kickback into my hand, oh boy, yeah. As expected, really, really uncomfortable slamming into those sharp corners, but worst in reverse grip. I think I wound up with a bruise here. It was really painful to use for stabbing and thrusting. Next test. Slashing and hacking into a piece of dry bamboo. This is kind of an abusive test, but this is where I have to put the caveat. The majority of my blades, vast majority of my blades, have survived that test with zero damage. And again, this one is designed to take some abuse. I'm looking to see if I can intentionally induce a chip or a roll or fragile edge. And yeah, this edge got chewed to pieces, but not all of the damage that you're seeing was from the bamboo test. Things got worse. Now, I did have a partially diminished edge when I went to the next test, which was shaving on some hardwood boards, and I found myself doing a lot more filing than shaving. I was trying to make feather sticks or whatever, you know, get some nice curls out of it. Yeah, didn't get that to happen very effectively at all. Chopped into the boards, and I expected it to do a lot better. It was doing a lot more hammering than it was chopping, crushing those boards rather than chopping through them. And then we got to the last test, which was a bit of batoning. And again, I feel like the knife is designed to take this sort of thing, but what you're seeing here is one pass through an already split, kiln-dried piece of firewood. And it did that. There's one big old gouge in here that's bad enough. Right here on that corner, my wife took a look at it and said, "Is that a crack in the blade? Are you sure that's not a crack in the blade?" I'm kind of wondering if that sharp little shelf corner there might wind up being a stress riser, but I'm not going to know until I get the finish off. So let me see what it's going to take to repair this. Refinish, which at this point is going to be reprofiling the edge, stripping off the traction coating because Mike hates it, and, well, maybe some other changes. And from your perspective, I'll be right back. Give it to us smooth and blued. Hobbits keep nasty traction coating. All right, worst impression ever. But stripped off the traction coating. Good news is no damage to the surface of the blade, no signs of cracking. But it did reveal some really deep scoring, don't know how well it's showing up on this camera, in the surface of the blade vertically. It looks like they finished it off at like a 60 grit. And I've heard the traction coating is used potentially to cover up, well, roughly finished blades. Went ahead and repaired, rehoned, reprofiled the edge. While I was at it, I sharpened the back edge. Took it out, repeated the bamboo test, wood shaving, wood chopping, much better performance, and damage did not repeat. Speaking of damage, though, I didn't realize the tip had rolled over. And the only thing I had done to the tip was thrust it in the lapel, and my lapel is specifically designed to take repeated power thrusts from a rapier and not damage those needle-fine tips. So the fact that my lapel apparently bent the tip over, that's pretty disturbing, but then so was the rest of the damage. I did then go ahead and repeat the thrusting and stabbing tests after I had also rounded off all of the unfriendly sharp square corners of the guard. So no more painful collisions with my hand. And much better performance without damage repeating. Now, having this much steel exposed before I blued it, I went ahead and took my test files to it in a lot of different places and came up with some very interestingly inconsistent results. Down here towards the guard and the spine, definitely below 50 HRC, probably due to annealing. But the business part of the edge was quite variable. Some spots were slightly above and some spots slightly below 50 HRC. So my diagnosis is I think all that damage was being incurred because they just ground that edge too fine and too ragged, which included the tip, and the steel's just not very hard to begin with. Got it to an edge that's not quite shaving sharp, but yeah, a whole lot more slicey than it was, absolutely. And when it comes to binding materials like cardboard, yeah, much better performance. Finally, carry, handling, my overall impressions. I'm going to get carry out of the way really quick because the other two are going to kind of keep running into each other. I did try carrying it by the belt loop for a bit, and I just didn't like it, so I took this mounting off. Pretty simple job, just undo the Velcro. And what you're left with is a really slim Kydex shell that I've been shoving into my belt or waistband for cone carry style. And you'll notice you didn't hear the loud scraping anymore because, well, the traction coating's gone. However, yeah, I'm still getting some collisions on resheathing as the different shapes just sort of run into each other. Did put a little bit of heat to the feed lips, got back some of my retention without making it crazy tight. May also round some of these corners to make it more comfortable to shove into my waistband. May just go with a different carry system. Don't know yet, but for now, I'm living with this one. And speaking of living with this one, this is where things get very divided. Design of the knife by Joe Flowers, I'm going to say is awesome. Kudos to you, sir. I love the way it looks. I love the way it feels. I love the way it moves. I think it entirely fell apart in factory finishing. And I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt here. Did I simply get one that was badly heat treated? Did I get a lemon? Maybe I'll hear from Condor, maybe I'll hear from Joe Flowers. But if any of you have this knife and didn't get the mushy, fragile edge and tip, let me know. Because my other Condors made out of the same steel in the same hardness range, they're very durable. So yeah, I think I may have just gotten one that was badly heat treated. And that makes me not recommend it. But everything else I would recommend. Now, when it comes to knives of this size, I am going to do comparison videos going forward, but a couple of quick ones here. I could compare it to the K-Bar USMC, which is a similar size. This one is bigger than that one. The Becker BK7, okay, the BK7 is chunkier than this one is. Both of those certainly have a better, harder steel and more refined blades, but this one feels, I would say, much better in hand than either one of those. Now, comparison, another knife in my collection that I'm a little reluctant to make between this and Bear & Son Gold Rush, the smaller one. Because this knife is gorgeous and awesome, feels great in my hands, is a razor blade. Yes, I did fix the loose clicky guard. And held up to all of my tests with zero damage. And continues to be practically perfect in every way. It's also cheaper than this one. But the appeal of this one, back to that. Let's start from the grip. All right, seems pretty simple, but it has nice taper and swell, I feel, in all of the right places. Really slim up here. Allows me to grip choked up really high up so I can lock my thumb over the guard to get that leverage for some close-in, not only utility use, but chopping, slashing, and stabbing. I can also choke down with some reasonable security to get those better thrusts and snap cuts. That belly is awesome for slashing and chopping and, yes, snap cutting. Plus now I've got a fairly easily sharpenable back edge. I can flip it around North American Bowie style, use it in this geometry, which also works really great for thrusting. Or a conventional grip, back cutting. Yeah, that's there too. Moves very quickly and nimbly. Now it doesn't have enough blade length and mass that I feel like I could parry with it, so my tactics from my knife hand are going to be much more evasive, relying on whatever my left hand and the rest of me is doing, counter cutting, counter thrusting, back cutting. But yeah, I think it is a very comfortable knife. I feel pretty confident with it. Now in thrusting and stabbing, yes, in the extremes of tip geometry, this definitely falls more into the category of a sharpened shovel versus a needle. Needle being designed for maximum penetration. Sharpened shovel, durability, definitely imparts impact on the target. And if you take a look at that blade profile and consider the wound channel it might make, academically speaking, of course, I do want to keep the magic green dollar sign for YouTube monetization, but some food for thought there, and that might be the thought behind the design of the shape of the knife. Reverse grip, let's talk about that. Okay, you just saw me use my finger twirl that I don't recommend. I've just been doing it for decades, so it's a habit. Knife grip is definitely thin enough to allow me to do that. What about pinch flipping? Okay, let's talk about palm swell and then flare at the pommel. Yeah, it gives me some great spots to index. I'll pinch flip without having a bulky pommel in my way that might snag in my hand and threaten to throw the knife out of it if it hung up in the wrong place at the wrong time. So yeah, transitions are pretty smooth. So using it in the reverse grip. Edge facing away from me, that belly is great for slashing, and I do intend to do some comparison tests. Hooking in the stab, if I flip the blade around, yeah, different tip geometry, and I can use now that sharpened clip point this way to be quite effective. Almost like a karambit, you might say. Not quite, though. Otherwise, though, all right. So overall impressions, I'm going to say I would recommend the knife, but I don't think I have a good sample. I just don't think I got one that was properly heat treated. Again, if you happen to have one that's not as fragile as this one, let me know. Otherwise, I will be doing more comparison videos going forward. Until then, thanks as always for watching, following my journey, subscribing to the channel, liking the videos, adding to our conversation, and I hope to see you back for the next chapter of Mike's big martial knife exploration journey.